Good evening and welcome to the May 16th meeting of the Conway Planning Commission. We will begin this evening by calling roll. Unfortunately, our chair, Ray Williams, is under the weather, so we ask that you keep her in your thoughts this evening. So Laura King, Alexander Bainey,
Here.
Adam Bell,
Here.
Letitia Sanders-Jones,
Here.
Ethan Reed,
Here.
Drew Spurgers,
Here.
Larry Webb, and Greg West.
Here.
Okay. We do have a quorum this evening, so we can proceed with tonight's meeting. Just as a matter of note, the Conway Planning Commission makes recommendations to the City Council on public hearing items. Items reviewed on this agenda will be considered by the City of Council as early as May 24th, 2022. Items not approved by the Planning Commission may be appealed to the City Council within 30 days of the date of Planning Commission denial, with exception of decisions made by the Planning Commission acting as the Board of Zoning Adjustment. Just as a second point of housekeeping this evening, this is our first meeting with our new time of 6:30 this evening, so we appreciate all of those who are in attendance making that adjustment. Also, for those of you who may be new to joining us this evening, just as a matter of process, after an item is presented by the Planning Commission, we will ask for anyone to speak in favor of the item. The first speaker will have 10 minutes and all subsequent speakers will have 3 minutes. We will then ask for anyone speaking against. The first speaker will have 10 minutes and all subsequent speakers will have 3 minutes. We do ask that if there are multiple speakers on one topic, please coordinate your items as we want the opportunity to be able to hear from everyone this evening. So with that, we will move into our first public hearing item, and we will, actually, excuse me, I'm just jumping ahead this evening. So we will move to our first item on the agenda, and can I get an approval for the minutes from the April 18th meeting?
I move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone against? Same sign. We will consider the minutes approved. With that, we will move to our first public hearing item, and we will hear from the Planning Commission office the request for a conditional use permit to allow sand, gravel, or earth sales and storage in the TJ zoning districts for property located at 3450 Old Morrilton Highway, Arkansas Highway 64. And just for note, this was a request that was tabled at the April 18th meeting. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Like she said, this was tabled. We've been over the specifics. The main issue that came up was based on the drainage from this property to the neighboring property. I had went out, and a member of our engineering staff had went out to look at the property, and we also reviewed aerial imagery of the property over the past since 2011. The main changes on this property happened between 2015 and 2017, and this is when the tree line was pushed back. There were some trees that were removed. The pervious surface remained the same. We don't show that there would be any issue with water flowing from this property. And also, we do not see that there would be any drainage issues related to this conditional use, which is retail sales at this site. So we don't believe that allowing retail sales would create any additional drainage problems, which is what we're here for. So we would recommend approval. I made a few changes to the recommendations, and I'll read those. No variance of any kind may be subsequently requested. Conditional use is limited to sand, gravel, and/or earth sales and storage to include the storage of related equipment such as trucks and trailers solely in support of the landscape installation division. The cultivation and sales of plant or tree materials is prohibited. Such materials may only be stored on site temporarily when intended for use as part of a professional services landscape installation project. Perimeter screening is required along all property lines which abut residential uses. Screening may consist of dense landscaping, including understory trees and shrubs or fencing. If landscaping is proposed, an installation diagram and list of proposed species shall be submitted to the planning director for approval prior to installation. If fencing is proposed, height and material information shall be submitted to the planning director for approval prior to installation. Hours of operations are limited to 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday. All signage shall be permitted and installed in accordance with Article 1301 of the Conway Zoning Code. No additional structures may be moved onto or constructed on the site. Any proposed expansion of or addition to existing structures shall require an amended conditional use permit. This conditional use shall automatically expire if the approved use ceases for more than 18 consecutive months. And I would also like to add a condition that any changes or alterations to the site, including to the land, existing trees, shrubs, vegetation, etc., must be presented to the Planning Commission and receive approval prior to any action by the property owner.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any questions from the commission?
Yeah, I've got one. So was the new condition that you said there at the end the only change from last meeting?
That was a change, and also the hours of operation changed. We pushed it to 8 o'clock. I believe it was 7:30 previously, just to give a little more time
Correct.
for them.
Thanks.
Is the removal of trees on the north side of the property or the east?
It's on the north side of the property. We have, can you pull up the aerial? I can show you the aerial. If you'll pull up 2015 and 17, you can see where the trees were removed. It'll take just a second. So this is 2015 here, and then if you'll go to 17, you'll see the tree line moves back to where they cleared the property from the trees there. And that 2017 is the last significant change that you could see with the aerial images as far as tree removal.
About how much space is that? Just ballpark.
I mean, the total space of the property is 4.09 acres, so. Couple acres.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone here this evening to speak in favor of this item?
Hello, my name is Daniel Durden. That's my property that we're discussing this evening. Landscape contractor, Durden Landscape's been in business for a while, and we've decided to open up a retail location or apply to have a conditional use permit to have this location. We've been there for many years, storing the same material, same equipment, same trucks. We just cleaned it up and organized it and decided to do a retail or like to do a retail location in that area.
Mr. Durden, I failed to ask you to state your address. You got your name,
I'm
but
sorry,
I
Daniel
forgot.
Durden. It's 3450 Old Warrenton Highway, Conway.
Thank you, just for the record.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything
Questions?
else any questions for Mr. Durden? Thank you, sir. Anyone else here to speak in favor of this request?
Good evening. My name's Rick Main. I live at 3470 Old Marlton Highway. I border Mr. Durden on the west side. And like I said last time, he's been a great neighbor to me. I've asked him to do things, and he's come and done it even brought his crew sometimes, his equipment, and never charged me a dime for it. And I don't know how much better you could ask than that of a good neighbor. I don't really know what else to tell you. To be honest, if you got any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Are there any other folks here tonight that would like to speak in favor of this request? With that, we will move on. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to this request?
Hey, good evening. New faces here tonight. Kerry Johnson, 3400 Old Morrilton Highway. I'm to the east of Mr. Durden. As shown just a minute ago, those pictures, as far as the tree removal, that was not only tree removal. That was excavation of the hillside that built up his property that also flooded my property. So I know that's irrelevant to the issue tonight. As stated, I know that it shows in the comprehensive plan to eventually be mixed use, but right now it's residential. And he's TJ, I'm residential. So if we're going to use that as a deciding factor, we can also use the issue that we all know that'll eventually be annexed into the city. And at that point, the drainage issue becomes whose problem? The city. So I just want y'all to keep that in mind when it comes to the deciding factor on this. Yes, there was material stored there previously throughout the years, but not to the extent that it is now. So there's 20 different mulch bins there. You have vehicles in and out every day. Very annoying. As I stated before, I don't think any of y'all would want to look at that when you're sitting in your front yard trying to enjoy your evening, nor would you want to look out of your front door and see that either. Before, it was 3 or 4 different piles, excuse me, I'm getting over a sinus infection. 3 or 4 different piles of material that were used for the current jobs going on. So they would come in the mornings, load up, leave out all day. Now, it's in and out all day, every day. So load up in the morning, leave, come back in the afternoon, get in your personal vehicle and go home. Not anymore. It's all day, every day, in and out, gravel, mulch, the smell of it. It's way more than what it was before. Not just a couple of piles. It's 20 piles and a lot more traffic. And on top of that, the traffic is an issue. I've seen traffic backups there numerous times, people pulling out onto the highway. Retired Joe over here in his 85 Toyota Tacoma with his 16-foot trailer loaded down with mulch trying to pull off a hill into a traffic area that's 55 miles an hour. And it should, with log trucks coming down that highway, going to Menifee, to the mulch plant, and to the lumber company, and other vehicles, it's not if, but when somebody gets hurt. It will happen. It will be an accident. I've already seen traffic back up there from people pulling out, just not being able to get out into traffic long enough because there's blind curves coming from the east and west. I pulled out of my driveway, which is right next to his, for 7 years. You can't see vehicles coming. You can't see them until it's too late. I told my wife, who also sent a letter in, stating a lot of other issues, and I'm trying to make this short and sweet, but it's long. But you can't see. If you're not quick on your toes, you're not going to be out of there quick enough. And it's just, I'm not for this, just like I was last time. And I don't know what the earth sales meaning is. Can somebody state that? Does that mean digging more of the hillside out? Or does that mean, which is a drop off for me already? What does that mean? Can somebody clarify that? I don't know. Does that just mean material brought in that he can sell, or does that mean he can sell material off of the property itself?
Do you want Ryan to go ahead and answer?
Yes,
Or do you want,
go
okay,
ahead, sorry.
I want to be mindful of your time.
One of the conditions that were stated was any changes to the land itself has to come back before planning commission. So any digging of that hillside would have to come here before it would be approved.
That's pretty much all I have to say. I don't know if it does get approved, which I'm not for. As far as the screening goes, I know it's probably another question for Ryan. Is this going to be, 2 years from now, we can plant a tree this big that's going to take 30 years to grow? Or are we going to talking about, I don't know what that entails.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Next time we'll get multiple microphones set up.
That
for you
sounds
all.
good. He'll be required to submit a plan to the city to show screening, and then we'll have to approve that plan and have the screen installed, or we'll go out and check it. So it should be a fairly quick process.
So I think probably what we're addressing here is on the number 4 on staff recommendations. Thank you, Lauren. So I think that if fencing is proposed, height and material information shall be submitted to the planning director for approval prior to installation. Is that
Correct.
what you're, okay?
Yep.
Thank you, Ryan.
That's it. Thank y'all for y'all's time. I just really hope that y'all consider me and my family and my 3-year-old son as well. This is a nuisance, and I disapprove, but thank you. Any questions?
Anyone have any questions for him this evening?
I do.
Yep, go ahead.
Just real quick.
Mhm.
So I understand that the retail sales started recently. So prior to that, besides the flooding issues that you guys were having, was it more bearable? Was it easier? Could you enjoy your property, I guess? Did you ever make complaints to the city prior to the retail sales happening?
I didn't, because at the time, I guess I was just like Mr. Durden. I wasn't aware that the city also had a little bit of say in what was going on there due to the fact that he is in the county. It was more bearable because they were not there on the weekends. It was Monday through Friday only. And again, it was morning, showing up, loading up, leaving, coming back in the afternoons to get their personal vehicles and go home. So no traffic, affecting my son's nap times or anything like that.
And was his business already there before you moved in?
He was parking his trucks and trailers there, but that was it. I mean, there wasn't even material there at the time, as far as I can remember, but no, it was just trucks and trailers in and out. That was it. And then it turned into, a few piles of stuff. No big deal that they would load up in the mornings that they had already ordered for their landscape jobs, and then they would leave out and then come back in the afternoons.
All right, thank you.
Anything else?
Questions?
Thank y'all so much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition?
Thank you. Frank Shaw, 1315 Main Street, Conway, and I represent Carrick Johnson and have for 5 or 6 years on this particular issue of drainage. And while he didn't complain to the city, I have, and can confirm to you that I've directly complained to Mr. Durden about it, and we've been attempting to get him to resolve the drainage issue. So I'm going to briefly suggest to you that there are 3 or 4 things I want to point out to you. On the staff comments, number 1, it appears there have been no decrease in previous surface on the site. It does not appear any drainage issues which may exist are related to the use requested in question. So what I think that's saying is that putting stuff up on this dam he's built won't cause any more drainage issues. I would agree with that. They're already there. Secondly, on staff comments, I believe the comment has been made that city engineering has reviewed the request and believe this conditional use request would not change any patterns associated with stormwater runoff or retention. I agree with that. The problem already exists. And the more he puts up there on his flattened, between two hills, he's flattened the area. The more he puts up there, I would tell you the less likely he is to ever fix it. Now, last time we were here, and I respect this, he said it would bankrupt him to have to fix the drainage. What he did, he built a dam, he put a pipe under it. It's not big enough. Unfortunately, there are no photos of this. If you look at the third picture over there on the right, that shows Mr. Johnson's property. It doesn't show the pond he's built to keep from flooding his driveway. It doesn't address in here the fact that he's had to build a pond, and your staff comments are your recommendations. He's had to build a pond to keep his driveway from flooding because of what Mr. Durden has done. If you can flip back to that 17 picture or the 15 picture, the picture of the area that showed the zoning. Thank you so much. One more maybe. You can see that's an old picture. It doesn't picture the pond. Well, that's not a picture at all. But there you go. There's no pond shown on the pictures on your screen that you all have had a chance to view. To the right of the red line is Carrick Johnson's property, 3420. There's now a pond there where he's cleared trees and built a pond bank to keep his driveway from flooding so he can get in and out. Unfortunately, your staff comments, your recommendations, nor your photos, nor the photo you've shown here, none of those reflect the damage he sustained. The still picture that says property adjacent to the east could have shown his pond, but there are no pictures included for you all to review. So what I'm asking you to do is, if you haven't been, go look. If you can't go look, ask your staff to take some photos and pass this again until you have more information. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Shaw. Any questions for Mr. Shaw? Sorry. Thank you. Is there anyone else here this evening to speak in opposition? Looks like we may have heard from both those in favor and those in opposition, so we will bring it back into commission for discussion. So commissioners, what say you?
I guess, could we hear one more time about staff's review of the drainage situation?
We reviewed this and there was no change in pervious surfaces. Again, I showed you where he brought the tree line back between 2015 and 2017. When we reviewed it, the question is, because landscaping storage is allowed by right in the TJ zone. So what our review is adding retail sales at this site going to cause any additional problems related to the water runoff? And it was our decision that it would not.
Mr. Durden is already operating as a retail site just under the,
I believe he has been, since our last meeting. He was allowed to stay open. But before that, he was storing his material there.
Just to clarify, regardless of
Correct.
Will there be a timeline on when the trees and stuff will be submitted to the planning commission, to the planning department, and approved, installed?
In terms of a specific timeline, usually
30 days.
that would occur within about a month. If it doesn't get going at that time, we would sort of commence enforcement.
And if you would like to add that into the conditions, that would be fine also.
I feel like there's a lot of factors happening here. There's like drainage, and then there's just business operating in a residential area that you're having those noise issues and things too. So I have a heart for the business side, right? I'm a small business owner, so I have the heart of you wanting to run your business. But the retail part was added afterwards, and even though the drainage issue was there didn't seem to be as many complaints as what there is now with all of the noise. So I don't know if there's a happy medium on that to where maybe they don't operate on Saturdays to give them a full weekend to enjoy their property. But I'm sure Saturdays are probably the biggest retail day for a business like that. So I don't know if there's a way to come to a happy medium to maybe help both parties out in that respect.
Do we know, the thing I don't feel like I've gotten a clear answer on, and we may not know this, but and I realize it was some time ago. When did the retail business begin? How long has it been in operation? Mr. Durden, is that something that you have any kind of ballpark on that you could help us out with? Just an approximation.
It was mid-March, let's see, April, May. This is probably about halfway into March 14th, I think. We tried to open up the day we had that crazy snow day that came out of nowhere. We tried to open up that day, but that big heavy snow came in March, I believe.
So this year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
I didn't know if it was.
No, ma'am, I didn't know if you know exactly. It was in March this
So
year.
it was this year, okay.
Mhm.
All right, that helps, thank you.
It came as a result of a code enforcement complaint. We received it via email. We've not been able to identify the person, but
But you did respond to a code enforcement.
yes.
Appreciate that.
issues or at least a temporary fix.
I don't know if the applicant can, but Mr. Johnson might be able to. Tonight, we're making sure everybody gets their steps in at the planning commission.
Yes, ma'am. No,
Yeah.
this is how I like processes
Yes.
to go thoroughly. Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, I wanted to know how long ago had it been that you had to build this pond, or when did you realize that This is an issue. I've got to do something to correct the drainage myself.
Okay, so there was another picture that I had emailed Lauren, that was from 2017. I don't know, what year is that one from? 2021, okay, yeah. So shortly after that is when I had to build the pond, but the issue began in 2017, right when he got finished with the excavation. So April of 2017 is when it became a problem. And over the course of 4 years, I'd asked him to fix it. And see, now you see my pond, that's before it has filled up there at the bottom left. I finally gathered up the $20,000 to try and alleviate the issue. And it still has not fully fixed it. So,
Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Appreciate it.
So my thoughts are, if the issue or the request before us is for retail sales, that's likely not what caused the drainage issue, which is the major concern that we've heard here tonight. So I would tend to agree with staff's recommendation. Yeah, if there's no other discussion.
Yeah, I guess if there's no other discussion, is that do you want to make that in the form of a motion, or do you all need more time to discuss?
I wanted the tree. We're gonna make it an affirmative. The timeline for submitting that plan back to them, if that's possible.
So that would be reflected as a motion that moved to accept the staff recommendation and approve the request with the conditions indicated in the staff report, and an additional condition that the landscaping plan be submitted to staff within 30 days and installed within 90 days on the basis that, as conditioned, it would allow for appropriate use of the property and would not likely negatively impact adjacent property. Is that the motion?
Yeah, so I'll make the motion to approve staff's recommendation with all of the conditions, including the one additional, then any alterations be brought before the planning commission and the additional one that you just noted.
I would think, just one process question, the 30 days would be, we are not the 30-day timeline, the city council is the 30-day timeline.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
it's once it is actually approved.
Okay, so it kind of gives 45 days if you make the assumption that you could, okay. All right, so is that your motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we will vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, we're gonna do a voice vote, just to be clear. So please vote when I call your name. Laura,
No.
Alexander,
Yes.
Adam, Letitia,
No.
Ethan,
Yes.
Drew,
No.
Larry, it's not here, Greg,
No.
and I vote yes. That makes it a tie.
Makes it a tie.
And I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with what the bylaws are on that.
Passage requires a simple majority.
Okay. With that, the motion fails. With that, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, request for zoning variance to allow reduced setback for property located at 721.
Can I have a quick note?
Yeah, for sure.
So, Mr. Durden, the decision of the planning commission can be appealed to the city council. If that's your desire, you can coordinate with our staff on that particular issue.
Thank you, James. I kind of jumped the gun there. So we will move on to item B, the request for zoning variance to allow reduced setback for property located at 721 Fairview Street. We will hear from the Planning Commission office.
Yes, this location is at 721 Fairview Drive on 0.63 acres. It's currently zoned R2, low-density residential district. On the property is a 904 square foot single-family home. The reason for this variance is an additional 5 foot is required by the city for right-of-way dedication. So that is why the variance is going to go from a setback from the typical 25 feet to 20 feet. We would recommend approval with the following conditions: that the variances shall apply to the existing structures and shall become void if the structure is voluntarily destroyed by the owner. The structure may be rebuilt if destroyed by natural disaster or fire, and there is a rear shed on the property that must be removed or relocated prior to plat approval. This shed is right on the property line, so they're going to either have to pull it in before they replat this property into 3 lots, or they're going to have to get rid of it.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions for Ryan?
I just have one quick one. So is the house that's there, is it being torn down or is it being left?
The house will remain. What they're going to do is, the variance is because we require 5 feet of right-of-way. So the house will remain. They plan on splitting the lot in the rear and then splitting that into 2 lots in the back. But the house and that lot, the lot that we're dealing with, that house will remain.
So if they were only splitting it into 2 lots, the variance wouldn't be needed?
They would still require the variance for the right-of-way dedication.
Any other questions this evening or right now? All right. Is there anyone here to speak in favor, or is the applicant here?
How y'all doing?
Good. Can you state your name and address for the record, please?
Name's Megan Weckworth. I'm with the Tyler Group, 240 Skyline Drive in Conway. I'm just here on behalf of the applicant with the additional right-of-way. It scoots that property line back, which scooches the building line setback back, and so we're just asking for a variance on that guy. Questions?
Any questions for Megan? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak in favor? Okay, anyone to speak in opposition? All right, we will bring this back into commission. Commissioners? Anyone feel compelled to make a motion?
Move to accept the staff recommendations and approve the request with the conditions indicated in the staff report.
Motion by Alexander. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, the motion passes. The new microphone setup is giving us a test this evening. All right, we will move on to the third item for our agenda this evening, the request to rezone 20.05 acres located east and north of existing 1,200 place apartments, phases 1 and 2, east of Covington Way from I-3 to MF3. So a rezoning request. And we have James with us this evening.
Yes. So this is intended for another phase of the 1,200 place apartments. Property to the west is MF3. To the south, it is A1. It's occupied by the training center for the fire department and police. And then to the north and east, it is I3. So this is kind of a transitional area, I would say. The eastern part of the property has a drainage way that kind of forms a natural boundary that defines a border between the industrial to the east and the change in activity that's been seen towards the west. All of this was originally intended for industrial development, but as you can see with the apartments and the restaurants and retail that have occurred to the west, that has changed over time. We anticipate that the site could support about 232 additional multifamily units based on the rezoning. This would produce about 1,263 vehicle trips per typical weekday. Traffic on that section of Dave Ward Drive is currently about 32,000 vehicles per day. That's still likely a high estimate to a certain degree on the amount of traffic that's generated. Those estimates are usually estimate about 10 trips per unit, which is that's a lot of Walmart trips. But that is the best available data that we have. In terms of some of the comments, looking at this, it is not consistent with the comprehensive plan. But again, there's been a transition within this area that makes us feel like this is an appropriate use to the location. The third phase will contain, somewhere between 208 and 224 units, which should be varied between 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and townhomes. The creek is running to the north and south. It bisects the site from the property that's to the east. And we don't feel that the rezoning would negatively impact adjacent properties. In terms of there's multifamily already directly to the west. The eastern side of that forms a natural boundary, so it sort of fits within this area. So on the basis of that, staff recommends approval of the request as it would allow appropriate use of the property in context and wouldn't negatively likely impact adjacent properties. So any questions?
Thank you, James. Is the applicant here, or is anyone here to speak in favor of this?
Gary Burris, architect, 11912 Canis, Little Rock, Arkansas, representing the developers in this proposed expansion. We're extremely excited about it. Phase 1 has done very well. Phase 2 is currently under construction, and we really see this as an extension of what we're already doing in the area. Part of what we did in Phase 1 and Phase 2 is extend the Covington Way Street all the way to the south with a cul-de-sac, which also works to allow the Conway Fire Department additional access into this area. We're also excited about the addition of townhomes and their placement on the site against the drainage area, the more natural nature area. We see that being a real positive to the overall project.
Are there any questions? Thank you for that. Anyone else here to speak in favor? Anyone to speak in opposition? All right, well, with that, we will bring it back into commission. Commissioners, what say you?
I make a motion to accept the staff recommendation and approve the request.
I second it.
Thank you, Ethan, with the second by Letitia. It caught me off guard. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, with that, the motion passes. We will move on to item D, and it looks like we have James again.
Yeah, so this area probably looks a little bit familiar. We've had a lot of development and requests within this location within a short amount of time. This is a request to modify the existing conditional use permit for that property, which will be housing a Shadrack's Coffee. They've already got their use in place, but following sort of the review of the property to the east, we looked at this existing conditional use permit and coordinated with some of the neighbors and the applicant and asked the applicant to submit a request to modify it. Essentially, what the modification request amounts to is changing the brick wall that was required on the south property line, changing that to a wooden fence. Reason being is that the brick wall would be sort of pretty invasive in terms of construction and would actually tear out some of the existing green space or some of the existing plantings with the footings and everything that would be required to construct that. And then in addition of a 30-foot green space buffer or a vegetative buffer, we went out there and measured the site, looked at where the existing tree line is, where it extends out, and figured out that 30 feet would keep that intact. But additionally, since it would be a vegetative buffer, it would be allowed to grow in and provide a good dense method of screening. So based on that, staff recommends approval of the request. The conditions indicated in there, retail general shall be allowed. That is an existing condition on there. Driveway curb cuts shall meet development review standards. Cross-access, shared access shall be used unless outstanding conditions warrant otherwise. That's an existing one. The development shall be built in a manner that's consistent with the applicant's development review application for Shadrack's Coffee. That's a new condition. 30-foot green space buffer, no parking or structures is required along the south property line to be properly maintained by the property owner. The buffer shall be vegetated and left in an undisturbed state. That's a new condition. Any additional structures, expansion of uses not permitted by right, or additions to those structures indicated on the applicant's development review application shall be subject to review through an amended or new conditional use permit. That's a new condition. These are ones that we have as just pro forma standard conditions that we apply for all now. Conditional use permit expires from the date of issuance if no building permit has been issued, and if the site or any structure on an individual lot becomes vacant for more than 18 months, the conditional use permit shall become void for the site or a portion of the site as appropriate to the extent of the vacancy. So, any questions? And that small figure there, that's that you see in to the right. That's me standing at where 30 feet is. So.
I feel like, oh, James.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. I feel like you can just answer them here. It's fine. This one was discussed quite a bit 2 meetings ago. So,
This was the same fence, right? It was
Right.
a different restaurant. but-
It was a property just to the east.
Okay.
yeah, just to the
So this property is just to the west. So we were attempting to get the same conditions among all the properties after discussing with some of a representative that was sort of a spokesperson for some of that neighborhood to the south. After we talked about having an undisturbed vegetative buffer, that was viewed as very positive. And so that's the reason why we encouraged the applicant to apply.
Okay, so it's consistent with what we did. Okay, I
Yes.
think that's what I
Yes.
was missing. Okay. Is the applicant here or anyone to speak in favor of this? Good evening.
Tony Pavan, 30 Wedgewood Drive, Greenbrier, Arkansas. I'm the applicant. We're happy with everything they've suggested to us. We think it's very fitting for the property to be willing to work with any other suggestions.
Any questions? Thank you. Anyone else here to speak in favor? Anyone to speak in opposition? All right, that we will bring it back into commission. Commissioners, what say you?
There's no discussion, I'll make a motion.
All right, do you want to go ahead and?
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to approve the request as stated and with the recommendations made by the staff.
Motion by Letitia, do I have a second?
Seconded.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, same sign. All right, motion passes. With that, we will move on to item E on the agenda. James, is it you? This request was also tabled at the April 18th meeting.
Correct. So this item and then the next item are both related. So the request to rezone to C2, that will enable a request to ask for a conditional use permit for a self-storage facility. So these are interrelated in that sense. So there will be some duplication of material there. This is again a property or an area where we've had a lot of discussion recently, that you all have reviewed a lot of cases in that. The property is currently zoned R1, which is single-family residential. They're requesting to go to C2, which is what we call neighborhood commercial or a neighborhood commercial district. On the comprehensive plan, it indicates single-family for this location. With the rezoning to C2, the traffic impact could vary. Based on the applicant's stated intentions, the site would be developed as a self-storage facility. That development would yield approximately about 100 vehicle trips per day. Per typical weekday. The most intense by right use, which would be a pharmacy or small scale retail store, would generate approximately 1,300 vehicle trips per typical weekday. Those would be solely directed onto Bill Bell Lane, which currently has about 5,500 trips per day, where it's actually on South German, directly north of Stone Dam Creek. The site is not within any regulated floodplains or floodways, and it would be served by Conway Corp utilities at the time of development. We anticipate a future roundabout to the south where Stanley Russ comes in there at some point in the future because of that awkward alignment of that and it just being sort of a bit of a dangerous intersection currently for future street improvement. C2 is intended to provide for retail development and personal services that support the surrounding residential neighborhood. So that's sort of the intent of the C2 district. Rezoning is not consistent with the comprehensive plan, which calls for single-family residential. Uses in the area are generally consistent with this land use pattern. So in general, you have predominantly single-family. So that is an area where I would say this is definitely not consistent with the plan in that extent. That being said, the property is adjacent to the east to an existing Conway Corp sewer and utility facility. Is anticipated that use of this facility will be increased in intensity in the future with a request at some point in the future where Conway Corp will bring in a request for a service center at that location. In staff's view, that mitigates the comprehensive plan to a certain degree in that instance, because then this becomes a little bit more of a transitional area. That is one of the reasons why in previous requests, folks have asked for multifamily, just simply because you start getting a little bit more odd-shaped piece of property, and it becomes a little bit less attractive for single-family development. So that is sort of one of the reasons why this area keeps coming back up. Given future use of the adjacent site of use that would allow transition to the existing single-family neighborhood to the intense public utility use would be compatible for the surrounding area and a good alternative to multifamily development. By right, allowable uses in C2 are limited. This would allow restricted retail, which would allow something like a pharmacy or general merchandise store, such as a dollar store. Those could likely provide convenience to the nearby area. However, given the traffic counts on this stretch of roadway, it's not likely that you would see any type of retail develop, just simply because I'll say that Dollar General shows up everywhere, but it's not likely that they would look at this site in particular. The site is adjacent to the proposed Northwest Trail, which is intended to connect Little Rock and Lake Beaver Fork. So that's a regional greenway. Staff doesn't view that the rezoning would likely harm adjacent property. So based on these, staff recommends approval of the rezoning. Although the rezoning isn't consistent with the plan, provide a reasonable transition from the adjacent utility facility and allow for compatible use of the property and not likely harm adjacent property. So any questions?
I've got one question. Can you just educate me on how this request and the next one relate and why we're asking for the rezoning here and then the conditional use next?
Yes. So to enable the conditional use permit for a self-storage facility, which is the applicant's intent, they have to have C2 zoning. So it's not allowed in a different zoning. So they're asking for C2 zoning first to enable them to ask for a conditional use permit for a self-storage facility. So, for instance, if this one passes, then the next one can be considered. If this one fails, then the next one cannot be considered.
But if this one passes, you're opening up the door for those other uses that you mentioned.
Correct, yeah. So when you review this, you have to review it not only as the applicant stated intention, but also the sort of the all the different types of different potential uses that are likely. The reason I said that, and that's the reason I had so much discussion about a dollar store, is that's the most likely use apart from self-storage, but I don't think based on the amount of traffic that is on the roadway, the traffic counts, that would be a viable use, more than likely.
But to say it's not a viable use, it also would not have to come back for approval.
Correct, yeah. So a pharmacy or something like a dollar store, it would be permitted by right at that point. Correct.
Any other questions for James this evening or right now? Okay.
All right.
All right. Anyone, is the applicant here to speak in favor of this, or anyone here to speak in favor of this? Come on up.
Hello, I'm Chris Thornton, 855 Ellis Avenue, Conway. First of all, thank y'all for being here and giving up your dinner time to do the hard work of the city, and I know this is hard work. I've done some similar types of work before, and so thank you. I'm excited about our project. I think I'm maybe even more excited about this later in the agenda, so y'all have a fun agenda tonight. Regardless of how this goes, that's going to be awesome for Conway. The first yes vote for this project came from me and my family. You might say, well, of course it was a yes vote. You're the guy standing here proposing it. I'd like to tell you something about myself because I think it's important to whether or not you've got to decide whether you trust me or not to do what I say I'm going to do. And I want to say in 1999, as a builder and a realtor, there were some issues in the city of Conway that I felt needed to be worked on. There were some very critical development types of questions that had to be figured out for the city. There were some police and fire department issues that needed to be worked out for the city. And I felt like I had to get in the game and participate in some of that. The Log Cabin Democrat came out to fight me because they assumed that I was there to push forward the realtor builder push to defeat the impact fee for new construction. And honestly, I thought that was one of the things that I couldn't imagine that I would vote for that. But I want to tell you that after hearing the professionals present their cases for the impact fee, knowing that I would lose a lot of friends, I felt like it was the right thing for Conway. And I voted for that. A lot of my friends have never forgiven me for that. And I knew they never would at the time it happened, but it was the right thing to do and I voted for it. I served 3 consecutive terms on the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. We went through 2 very difficult transition periods. Some of those people were my friends, and some of them were hurt by the fact that we had to move forward with Conway as a city. I carried the boxes out of the Chamber of Commerce building with my friend crying, but we ended up with Brad Lacey and his team running the city. That was the last transition, the Chamber of Commerce, that was the last transition that I was a part of in my tenure, and I feel like that was a really good thing for Conway, and I put that first. I've been on the board of directors of the Rotary Club in Conway. Service before self is their motto. Those ladies and gentlemen practice what they preach there. So, bottom line, if this was bad for Conway, I would not be here to propose it. The second vote, yes, is with the planning staff. And you know, these guys have no political agenda. They tell people no every day, and they are very comfortable doing so. They've told us no on this same project last time we were here, before we unveiled the proposal for what we want to do with this. They said no. Having seen the packet that you have in front of you, they said yes. So part of the reasons for that is that the land behind this property is industrial, and it's going to be a very intense industrial use. The land to the south of it is industrial, and it's going to be a very intense industrial use. The land to the west of it is Bilbell Lane, which is a collector that carries some pretty significant traffic and some pretty fast traffic across it that would be a hazard, I feel like, and a nuisance to single family. I don't believe that single family are going to want what you see there on 3 of their 4 sides. And so that's the reason that we're here, is what will be good for it. The drop back position to that, a good natural transition is multifamily, but that's already been decided that that's not desirable because of traffic counts. And sometimes there's some noise with that. Always there's some traffic with it. This use is gonna be the very best neighbor for this particular piece of land that there is. There is no quieter use for this land. There is no lower traffic count use for this land. If this land was next to my house, I would gladly trade what I have next to my house for what this is going to be. I build self-storage. I've built it, what was originally the West Conway mini storage. I built the Conway mega storage on Dave Ward Drive. I built the Hogan Dave Ward Storage Center on Hogan Road. I built Chenal Highway 10 mini storage in West Little Rock. I've never built a dollar store. I've never built a pharmacy, and I don't anticipate that I ever will. This will be done per my word to you promptly and professionally and with quality. I also am in the home construction and subdivision development business. I've built behind my house in the village at Hendricks, the townhomes there. There are many features on those townhomes and on that street that were not required by the city, not required by any covenants or anything. They're just enhancements to what's possible. There are planners there that didn't have to be there, that I came to the street department and had to twist Finley Vincent's arm to get approval to put the planters in that were an upgrade. And he said, "I'm glad you did that." I try to tell developers into doing that, but it's expensive and nobody wants to do it. I did that voluntarily. We put the gas lanterns in. We did a lot of things there. Same thing goes with, we build 55 and over neighborhoods. We built Stonebrook Cove. It's a gated neighborhood in central Conway that is surrounded by a very nice brick wall. It's very well landscaped. It has a very nice nightscape to it. I'm very conscientious about those things. Woodland Cove is on South Donaghy. I was not required to put a brick wall around that, but I did, and it looks nice. And I think if you go by there, you'll see we put our heart into building something that's going to be attractive and an amenity for the city. So I appreciate y'all being here. I appreciate you hearing me, and I hope that you'll join me in voting yes for this project. Are there any questions?
Questions? Thank you. Thanks. Anyone else here to speak in favor of this request?
I'm Bobby French with Central Arkansas Professional Surveying, 1021 Front Street. We've kind of worked with a couple different developers on this property looking at, and we have looked at some residential, and it's just the shape of the way the road come in, and we never could get anything to work residential on it. Just the way with everything we was going to have to do the layout just didn't work. So, and then Chris kind of came in with this, and we've done several different projects with him. He's always, done a good job and done what he said he's going to do, and I believe he would here too. But I know it's a residential area and stuff, but there is the I-3 Conway Corp. We've been working with Conway Corp over to the east, and I know they're getting ready to do it. Like James said, they're getting ready to move a bunch of stuff over in that area. So I do believe Chris will do what he says he's going to do, and if it is passed, everything will have to be approved through site plan review, and screening, and the material that they have to use and all that will go through site plan review. And I believe he'll be a good neighbor and does what he said. But that's all I got. If y'all got any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Anyone else here to speak in favor of this?
I have a question, if I could ask you a question. Can I speak neutral? Because I'm the property owner to the north, and this was my property here.
Sure, you have 3 minutes.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
sure. Okay, I have the problem, Frank Shaw, 1315 Main Street, on the property to the north, which is located on your map as Tassar Road. And then north of that, this parcel was part of my parcel that I bought from the Bell family. And then south of that, the little point due south of the yellow lines was also my parcel. And then the property to the southwest was my parcel. We came in a year ago to ask to rezone that multifamily. It was argued that it was a residential area. The Conway Court plat's been there for 20 years. It's an industrial area. The reason that I sold the yellow property not to Chris, to someone else, is because I couldn't make it work as residential one property. We're having all kinds of problems with our lots that front Tassar Road on both sides, as well as on LaCroix and Bill Bell. That property between LaCroix and South German on Bill Bell has been deemed by the city as unusable. We're going to come back and submit a PUD to you real soon. Because of the curvature of the street, it makes it just really hard. Some of your lots come to a point and they're 400 feet long on one side and 60 on the other, 80. It is a difficult piece to develop. I sold that parcel to some other buyers, and I'm north of it. That street Tassar Road was asphalted last Friday. We'll have a final plat approval to James hopefully in the next few weeks, and hopefully our one houses will be going there very, very soon in the next few weeks. And then one more street north of that are planned that would tie in with Carolou Lane. After that, our plans are tentative for the next 20 acres that are up there. Conway Corp is going to put their pole plant there. Everybody knows that. They're going to make an engineering plan out of it. It's common knowledge. I have sold the parcel south of the yellow line to Conway Corporation. That's fact. And this has been in the works for some time. So I got denied for a less restrictive use than what they're asking, but I'm not necessarily against this because I couldn't figure out how to develop it either. So I'm only here to give you some history and as an owner adjacent. And so I absolutely have no opinion and respect whatever you do. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Shaw? Thank you, Mr. Shaw. We appreciate it. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this? Okay, we will move on to those to speak in opposition. Is there anyone to speak in opposition?
I'm David Johnson, 1604 South German Lane. I live about a quarter mile as the crow flies from where they're wanting to build this. I've worked for, up until about 2 years ago, for 25 years, putting in security systems for these things. And, cameras, gates, the whole thing. I mean, up to date, computer control. And I really hate to see this put in this residential area because it is a magnet for thieves. And they sit at the end of the road and wait for somebody to pull up to those gates and code in. And when it gets close to dark, they'll go up behind them and tailgate them in. So they don't have to code in. And in the case of, I was looking after 7 of these units, and the guy I was working for is putting in one out here at Conway right now. And we finally wound up cutting hours back, like from 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning. And when they would tailgate in behind these cars late in the afternoon, it would be pretty close to lockup time. Well, they knew they weren't going to be bothered all night long, so they had all night to do whatever they wanted to do in there. And they'll drive up and down the street, and even in these units, and they'll watch who is bringing what in and who's taking what out. And they wait till they open the door, and they'd say, well, number 32's got a washing machine. I need that washing machine. And they'll sit at the end of the road and wait to tailgate in. Well, if you've got a kid that's got a bicycle out in the front yard, they don't have a bicycle. If you've got a lawnmower in the front yard, it's just a whole lot easier to get that than it is to break into those units. But boy, it was at least one a month at that time he had 6 when I was working there. He had 6 different units. One of them was at Cabot. He had one at Jacksonville, one at Heber Springs. He's building one here. I don't remember where the rest of them were now. But I feel for those people that are living up there close, and those houses are close together. They're all young people with kids. They're going to lose their property if it's in the yard. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Anyone else to speak in opposition?
Peggy Bonds, 1600 High Point Drive, and I disagree with all the traffic because there is continuously wrecks behind my house at the corner of Favre and South German Lane. And not only that, they are on down the road, there is wrecks. It is not a good area for more traffic. And a roundabout up there at the other end isn't going to help all that much. I mean, they're really going to do a roundabout. There ought to be one there at the corner of Favre and South German Lane. But then you're going to be digging into people's backyards and front yards. So to me, yes, that if you open the door to put that in, it says we're going to put the other in, and there's nothing to stop it. And I am totally opposed to it. And I got a feeling that not half of the subdivision I live in got a letter. I brought someone with me that I happened to mention it to, and she didn't get a letter. And she's in the same subdivision that I'm in. So, you know, I'm asking you to look at another angle on that property. It may not be good for houses, but it would be better for everybody if it was houses instead of something that brought in the bad. And, you know, I'm sorry I feel this way, but I like peace. And it's a shame that we already have problems around through there. and the traffic is unreal. So you might want to check the police reports and all of that on how many wrecks and things like that and how bad they are.
Thank you. Are there any questions? James, can you just give us all a little education on what the requirement is for notice?
Yeah, so it wouldn't, depending if the people that are adjacent to that within the neighborhood, if they fall within 200 feet, they would be required to be noticed. But if they fall outside of that boundary, then they wouldn't. So we got verification from the applicant that they provided notice, so that it meets the notification requirement.
So the neighbors on each side of me wouldn't required to have one?
If it falls within 200 feet of the property, which we have a GIS application that basically does an exact buffer around the property, 200 feet. So if it didn't fall within that boundary, then they didn't get notified.
Well, one of them is at 1600 in Fawn Lane. South German is their back door. They didn't get one. I feel like that somebody really didn't do their homework on that. And the ones going up the hill from there, and then the others that are a corner of South German Lane and far, they're also, they didn't get a letter.
It will be, Lauren, are they sent out to the property owner? So they're sent out to the so it could also be if they're a tenant instead of the property owner, they
No,
might
they
not.
own the property.
So it's 200 feet within.
But
that.
it's 200 feet. So we generate the list. They provide us proof of mailing. So I mean they have met the requirement.
Let me state it like this. If my neighbor to my south didn't get one and they're closer to it than I am, somebody didn't do their homework.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition?
Hello.
Hey.
I'm Sherry Smith. Fletch and I live at 1825 Daniel Lane, where we've lived for the past 23 years. I won't reiterate that the city plan says this should be R1. That's been approved in the last zoning last summer. Since that approval, the homeowners and property owners in that area have watched what used to be a beautiful stretch of road turned into a barren, treeless, ugly patch of land. That's not fair to us or the city, because that you have to take into consideration the city as a whole, not just one person. Preserving the R1 zoning in that area is the only way to return that area to what it once was. I'm sorry if someone made a mistake and bought that piece of property without doing the proper investigation and finding out how difficult it would be to turn that into R1, but we should not have to pay for that. Development should not come at the cost of quality of life and decreased home values for the owners of the homes that we've spent decades taking care of and paying property taxes on. We understand that growth in the city is inevitable, and with that growth comes change. But there's no reason to create a commercial island in the middle of a residential area. What does the applicant say? Could provide us a pharmacy, general merchandise store that would benefit us in that area. We live literally 3 minutes from Dave Ward Drive. We have pharmacies, we have medical facilities, we have restaurants, we have a Dollar General store, there's a storage facility on Sturgis Road. All of the things we need are already in that area. There's absolutely no reason to create a C2 zoning in the middle of a residential area. We understand that this growth comes with change. This is not the appropriate change for this area, and developers should not be allowed to ram that change down the throats of those people already invested in this area just so they can make a quick buck in the easiest way possible. Irresponsible zoning can destroy the beauty of our city. Please deny this request. And in terms of Conway Corp, I've been a neighbor of Conway Corp in that area for the entire time I've lived there. They maintain their properties, they keep them neat. If there's a pole barn, I trust Conway Corp will keep it neat. I would much rather have Conway Corp as a neighbor than have a Dollar General or even a storage facility. And traffic is another issue. We have traffic from Baker Wills Parkway, and they come down our road doing 70 miles an hour. They're going to do the same thing coming off of Bill Bell Lane and Sturgis. So please, consider the people that are already there. Consider the people that have invested all of their lives in their homes and their properties. Thank you.
Any questions? You're good. Thank you. Anyone else to speak in opposition?
Hello, I'm Buck Bing. I live at 1318 Stanley Russ Road. I would just point out, a lot of good points have been made in opposition. I would point out staff comment number 2, the proposed rezoning is not consistent with the comprehensive plan. I agree with Ms. Smith. The C2 in the middle of R1 does not make good logical sense. I also agree with Ms. Smith. If that piece of property was going to be so difficult to develop for any type of a residential zoning, there sure was a lot done to it before all of a sudden we can't do residential zoning there. And if you've driven by there, you've seen that. So, you know, I don't want to get into speculations or my feelings, but all of a sudden, well, that was denied. So let's find another way to make that almighty dollar. You know, another thing with the, it's a little contradictory that the staff comment number 2 is not consistent, but then we are going to allow that on that next page. I'll go back to opening Pandora's box or that can of worms for C2. What's next? This would be an island inside of residential 1. A simple Google search, you can do it right now, of storage facilities in Conway will pull up 26, just like that. How many do we need? There's nothing in this area other than residential homes. That was, at one point, agriculture. It's been rezoned to residential. Yes. Previously, multifamily. That doesn't fit there. And neither does commercial in this one piece. I would ask the commission to consider that. Consider the logistics and just the logic in putting that there and what that would do to those residents around it. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Mr. Buck? Thank you. Anyone else to speak in opposition?
Larry Fry, 1215 Stanley Russ Road. And I agree with what the other 3 people in opposition said. And I know to the east of that property is all industrial and commercial, but I don't want to see commercial infringe on our residential area any closer than what it is. So thank you.
She's walking up here. Remind me, where is the Conway Court poll thing going? Didn't you like how I described that?
My name is Judy Keith, and I live at 1530 Pinefield Drive, Deerfield subdivision. I agree with all the opposition remarks that have been made. I've lived in my house, which I own, for 21 years next month. And it's always been a wonderful residential area. I was really alarmed when all the trees were cut down on both the east side and the west side of South German and Bill Bell, and all these houses are being built. Once those houses are being built, number 6 is the traffic on South German is going to increase tremendously because of all these houses being built. And I don't know when the last traffic count was done. I don't remember seeing one on South German in a long time, but that's a real concern to me, plus all the other things that have been mentioned. And I do hope you'll reconsider or you'll consider denying this request for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak in opposition?
Donna Johnson, 1604 South German Lane. I agree with number 6. That's not true. It says the traffic counts on South German Lane are low enough. I live right on the corner of South German Lane and Favre Lane. Last May, we had a drunk driver run into our yard, totaled our BMW, pushed it into a building, totaled our fence. She had 2 young children with her. And that was the second time that's happened. We've put a brick wall up, so the next time that happens, they're not going to get into our yard. But it takes me sometimes 5 minutes to walk across the street to check my mailbox because of the traffic. And sometimes we can't even get into our driveway because of the traffic. They've destroyed trees south of us, just right behind our house, and on the side of our house. They destroyed the trees north of Acuff Lane to put housings up. So, I mean, there's no trees whatsoever left. So, and that little yellow square, why can't they just leave the trees there and make it prettier instead of destroying the land?
Thank you. I think we have a couple more folks to speak in opposition.
Hello, my name is Marcus Arnold. I live at 1205 Stanley Russ Road. I'm in agreement with pretty much all of my neighbors here. I've not lived there as long as what they have, but I can tell you in the time that I've lived there, I have enjoyed the peace and stuff that we do have there on Stanley Russ. As you see, they're in the process of building other subdivisions of all residential stuff right there. So just like everyone else has said, commercial C2 does not fit right there with all the current residential along with the ones that are being built right there as well. That's all I have to say for it. Well, other than traffic, like I said, I don't know anything about traffic count or anything like that, but I work for a local utility company here, so I am back and forth down the road all day, every day. And not only having, living right there, I do see how bad traffic is. It is terrible. We were trying to do work right there at the corner of Favre and South German. And we literally had to get our trucks with lights and stuff flashing to block the road because people, they don't care about flashing lights. They don't care about the cones that are out for utility workers or anything like that. I say that, but some people do. But that's neither here nor there. But the traffic wise, yes, it is bad there. Especially you get closer to that, that 5 o'clock area, people coming from the Baker Wheels, coming from Little Rock and things like that, coming off Dave Ward. So it does get very congested and stuff in that area. That's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak in opposition?
I spoke for it, can I speak against it now?
Mm-mm.
Okay, number 6, the traffic. The traffic is a real issue. The traffic control is a function of the
Mr. Shaw,
Conway
you
PD.
spoke, you were neutral earlier, so how are you going to speak this
I'm going to
time?
respond to some of these comments I've heard. I'm sitting here getting hammered by my neighbors.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
We've cut all the trees because everybody's lot in Conway was already covered with trees and you had to cut them for you to build your house. Okay, so that was a tree farm. They were built to be cut by Bill Bell. That's what we did. But you have to cut them for engineering purposes. So I don't want to be retaliatory, but when everybody says we murdered the trees, we killed the trees, we cut the trees, for engineering purposes, you have to level the land and put in water and sewer on grade, and it has to be done that way. But I'd like to remind everybody that built in that part of town because they love it there, but now they don't want anybody else to live in that part of town. And I think that's a valid point. So y'all want to live there, but you don't want anybody else to live there.
Mr. Shaw, I
just think it's inappropriate.
respectfully request that you address the commission and not the people that are attending this
So
evening,
with,
please.
with respect to item 6 on the staff report, the traffic is bad. And when the city built the tech park and then the state built Gilbert Baker Expressway, they planned apparently for Bill Bell to be a major thoroughfare. Else the city wouldn't have sponsored those 2 projects. So when those things happen and Stanley Rush Road is improved from a trail to a really nice city street with a bike lane, there's a reason for that, and it is to handle increased traffic. So I agree. I'm there every day, all day. The traffic is terrible. The speeding is terrible. That is a function of the Conway PD to fix. That is not your problem. And I say that with all sincerity because we pull out and we almost get hit every day too. So we'd like to see better enforcement and people to slow down. And as my neighbors to the northwest say, they've had wrecks in their yard that you can't get out of the driveway. But that's not a zoning issue. That is a police enforcement issue, I would submit to you. So having said that, I've spoken for it, against it, and I still have no opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Is there anyone else that would like to speak this evening? All right. With that, we're going to bring it back into commission.
I just have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
Who actually owns the property? Because our paper says Mr. Shaw does, but Mr. Thornton spoke as if it was his. Mr. Shaw said he sold it. Who owns the property?
Well,
The best as we can research, that's the most accurate information we have. If it's not, that's using publicly available resources. That's what we've been able to determine.
I don't know that it really matters for our purposes. I have the same question, but I'm not sure that it matters for our purposes. Any other comments within commission?
Yeah, so I've got a question probably for staff. And so I'm trying to separate what we're being asked to do here with the next item. And in staff's comments, there's things like the applicant's intention and the anticipated use of the Conway Corp. How should we be looking at that? Because that's tough to know what we're being asked to do with, I guess, comments like that.
Yeah, I think you keep both in mind. I'll use my story of the rezoning out at Chenal and Bowman in Little Rock. There were flags waving, little kids, holding balloons, and Mercedes driving, because that area was originally intended for multifamily. That's what was on the comprehensive plan in Little Rock. They got rezoned. The applicant said at that time that it was going to be, they're going to bring something different to the market. And so you can't always rely on the applicant's stated intention. Don't say that, I don't mean that in any derogatory sense to this applicant or anything or anyone else. But you do have to consider all of the possible uses and so that's why I indicated the most intense uses might possibly be a pharmacy or dollar store in C2 zoning. Fully understanding that what the applicant's intention is to do. So you have to kind of keep both in mind.
To follow up on that, I appreciate that. Staff's recommendation to approve this request is not based on the applicant's intention. It's you would to approve C2 zoning.
Yeah, I mean, in this instance, it was based on the idea that after reviewing all of the variety of uses that were allowed in that particular zone, and knowing what the applicant's stated intention were, that felt like it likely would provide reasonable use of the property without causing too much harm to the adjacent neighborhood. That was the basis of that.
Can you provide history on, and I have the previous planning books at home, but what all have we been asked to review for this particular piece of land before? So we've gone through.
I know it's been rezoned from A1 to R1. I'm not sure the full extent of the overlap that might have existed with the previous multifamily request.
I remember that one.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if it fully overlapped this property or not in that request. But yeah, it's been looked at multiple times. I mean, that being said, you have to think about what is most compatible, and understand that each request is evaluated on its own merit.
Any other discussion? Are you sure?
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve the staff recommendation to approve the rezoning request on the basis that the zoning would allow commercial uses supporting the surrounding area that would not likely harm adjacent properties.
Motion by Alexander. Is there a second? Okay, if there is no second, we cannot vote on the issue.
I would please.
Just.
Okay.
Put it to a vote second.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. I have a motion and a second. So with that, I am going to read the room and we're just going to go ahead and do a roll call vote. Is that okay with everyone?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Laura? No. Alexander?
Yes.
Adam? No. Letitia?
No.
Ethan?
No.
Drew?
No.
Larry is not here. Greg?
No.
With that, the noes have it. The motion fails. We'll give how about this? How about we just take 30 seconds for those that want to clear the room? We'll give the commission just a moment to stand up and stretch your legs, and we got just one more item. So just 30 seconds. So for those of you who are done with us this evening, if you'd like to stay, we welcome you to stay and take part in city government. If not, you are free to leave.
Do note the subsequent request for the conditional use, since this item failed, that item cannot be considered. So the request for self-storage facility will not be heard.
Thank you, James. So, 30 seconds. Within 30 seconds. So if everybody could grab a seat, as James mentioned, as we took a brief recess of which we didn't motion or approve, we just did that. Item F will not be considered this evening because item E failed. So that puts us to item G, the consideration to adopt a public art master plan as an appendix to the comprehensive plan. Mr. James.
Yes, so this item is coming before you. We're bringing it as a public hearing item. It's been presented to the council for the sort of the grand unveiling of the plan as a result of about 10 or 11 months of work. Public art master plan, it's intended to be funded via sort of voluntary contributions. some form of funding sources from the general revenue. And then additionally, in terms of, private investment and those sorts of things. With this, it's sort of intended to be sort of something that is to foster greater quality of life, also enjoyment of public art within our community as a whole. But it is I think a very vital and important piece of economic development for Conway going forward. The request for y'all tonight really is to hold the public hearing. I would ask that you vote to continue the public hearing until next month. Take some more time to review it. You all have copies of it. Let me know if you have questions, and then I'll be asking you for an actual vote on the item next month. So any questions on it in terms of our process or anything that we've gone through? We've had public engagement with it as we've gone through. The process has been led by a steering committee and then also worked closely with the Public Art Committee. The reason we're wanting to adopt it as an appendix to the comprehensive plan is so that it is sort of an official, municipally adopted plan, that it is part of our official policy. So that's the reason it's coming before y'all.
Just to be clear, you endorse it as it is?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd make a motion to consider table this until next month for the consideration to adopt a public master plan.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? We did not open it up for comments. Is everybody okay that's left in the room that we did not? Okay. Just want to make sure. Just want to do our due diligence. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. That concludes the public hearing portion of our meeting. We are moving on to item 2. And it is announcements and additional business. And so there's a request for a sign variance on 554 Museum Road. Come on down. I bet we can do this pretty efficiently. James is going to present, and then we've got someone, I assume, to speak in favor of it.
This is a request for an off-premise interstate sign, and so that's why it's coming before you. The signage code permits within 1,000 feet of the center line of I-40. It permits interstate sign zones, which those can be up to 300 square feet in size and 75 feet tall. This particular applicant is asking for that to be placed on an off-site location just to the north of the property on the Hanks Fine Furniture property. This is being requested because of the visibility to that property, sort of to allow it to have visibility, better visibility towards Oak Street is the reason for the request. The basis for variance review on an item like this is you can grant variances on matters of sign height, location, or other technical requirements when special conditions or circumstances exist that are not applicable to other land structures or buildings, such that literal interpretation of the ordinance would result in undue hardship. Again, what they're requesting is a 75-foot tall, 300 square foot sign, which would otherwise be allowed under the code, but it is being requested because it is off-site. So, any questions?
Thank you, James.
All right.
To speak in favor?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
come on down.
All right, so my name's Eric Bowen. I own Bowen Kemp Construction and Commercial Realty out of Fayetteville, Arkansas. To say that I've been working on an Olive Garden is an understatement for a long time in this town. It's been I've been all over the board with it. I finally got them to where we need them. They traditionally like to make me jump through every kind of hoop to find the best thing, but as James had mentioned, that southbound traffic, I guess it is south, coming from 65 down that way, the corridor, it just sits best right in that little area. So I've agreed with the owner of Hanks, who I'm buying the property from, to put that sign in that little, I guess, flower bed or whatever it is that he's got right there between him and Napa. And we just feel like this will maximize our visibility to the highway, which obviously our building will be very visible. We just want people to know where it's at, which, they are the sleeping giant. They are a very well-run operation. I've heard many people talk about in here about how well they keep up properties, but I would challenge anybody in this room to go and find a property that's kept up better than what Darden does. They run a good operation. We've got a design that'll be coming into the city on the 20th from Eric Richardson, our civil engineer. We're real excited about it. This is the last little sticking piece that I need to get figured out. He's with the sign company permitting that works with him nationwide. So any questions for him or me, we're open, but this is very critical to get this deal approved and finalized and get the Olive Garden done in Conway. So that's it.
I have a question for James, I believe, actually. Was really good for that. My understanding, Hanks could put a sign there if they wanted to. They don't. They're selling proposed Olive Garden, this piece of land, to put a sign there instead.
An easement, yes. They're leasing part of it.
I can do whatever y'all want it to do. They don't care. I
Would they
can
need
buy it,
a
I can lease it.
But to be clear, Hanks could put a sign there today with nothing else from us.
Yes, so one of the potential motions, yes, Hanks could put one there. They do not have one there. So one of the potential motions before you would basically allow this in lieu of any future sign for Hanks. If the applicant released rights to the sign in the future, that would be the only situation in which Hanks would have rights to the sign. So
correct.
And I think it's just important to note too that if this sign goes through and gets approved, Olive Garden will not be putting an additional freestanding sign on our property. This would be the sole freestanding sign for that property.
For the record, can you state your name and your
I
address?
apologize.
No, now that you spoke, we got to have you do it.
Yep.
That's my fault.
That's okay.
Charlie Shaleel Site Enhancement Services, 6001 Nims Parkway, South Bend, Indiana.
Thank you.
To clarify, so if Hanks wanted to put the same sign there, would they have to come before us for a variance?
no, they would not have. The only reason a variance is being sought is because it's off premise, off site.
Okay.
That's the reason why.
And then I just have a general question. This may be for them, because I think I don't think Olive Garden will have any problem staying full. Just in my opinion, we hear about it all the time, and people are always asking about it. But is there going to be a sign like on the free, where you have the freeway sign that tells you about all the restaurants that are?
I don't do that.
Currently driving up and down the highway, I did notice there are those signs, but I did not see any open in the restaurant section. Typically, we call them trailblazers. Typically, Darden or Olive Garden does seek to have representation on those signs, but unless I'm mistaken, there are no current open vacancies.
And we're in a weird spot between Dave Ward and Oak Street. So really, which exit would you go and use? Because one of the selling points that I had for this property, and I know, James, I don't know if you remember this, but, I was working with the energy site there on 60, which was Oak Street and 40. And we were kind of going back and forth on that one. But, this property is just easily located between both exits. But which exit would the sign go on? Because you can get to it really both ways. If
It was just kind of a side note.
Well, and the reason why this sign is so important, and I think, we touched on it a little bit, is because of that visibility on Oak looking down Museum. It's a unique, I worked with a lot of Darden restaurants. This is what I do. I help them place their signage. I help them with their branding. Driving up and down the highway, obviously it's going to be clearly visible. There's no vegetation along the roadway. It's a perfect site, but getting to it is going to be a little bit of a struggle. So after, a motorist exits off the highway and they get onto Oak, the sign where we have it proposed is going to be a nice clear shot right down Museum, and it'll help navigate back to, yes, there's a lot of people from the community that will visit this Olive Garden, but there's going to be a lot of people driving up and down the highway that are not familiar with it, that aren't going to have it typed into their GPS, that they're going to see the building. They're going to say, hey, let's stop here, kids, be quiet in the back. Let's go to Olive Garden, throw some breadsticks in you. And, they're going to be able to see that sign. They're going to be able to navigate down Museum after they see it on Oak. So it's really important for us.
Any other questions for the applicants? Thank you, guys. Let's bring it back into commission. Discussion? Anyone feel compelled to make a motion?
So, yes, I would make a combined motion of the first two. So a variance to approve current proposed sign support structure. I'm sorry, I lied.
I think that, yeah.
Strike
so
that.
I think that all four of those are part
All
of
together?
would be the potential for consideration if you were making that motion.
Great. That is the motion that I'm making.
Well, so here's the question that I've been reeling with until we get to this. Do we need to read all this, or do people know what this is? Like, do they know what this motion is?
So,
We have some examples just to keep us on track.
so the staff sample motion on this would be a move to approve the variance request with the following conditions. Variance approval shall be limited to the current proposed sign support structure. If the sign support structure is removed, excluding modifications to the sign cabinet, it may not be replaced unless conforming to the sign code. No additional freestanding signage shall be permitted at the site where the sign is proposed, 650 Museum Road. The property to the south, intended for the future Olive Garden location, shall not be permitted any on-site freestanding signage. If rights to the sign approved by this variance are assigned to the lot on which it sits, 650 Museum Road, freestanding signage may be permitted on the site intended for the future Olive Garden, 554 Museum Road. Any landscaping displaced by the sign installation shall be replaced as indicated in the applicant's proposed plans.
Are you good with that? Yes, ma'am. Drew, is that your motion?
That is my motion.
Thank you, James. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone, sorry, anyone opposed? All right, with that, your motion passes.
Who's second?
Thank you.
Alexander.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your time this evening. We have come to the end of our agenda. Anything from the commission?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, with that, we will consider tonight adjourned, and we will have our next meeting in June. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.